The intrinsic value of life is one of those phrases people keep on the shelf like a fire extinguisher, not because it puts out real fires, but because it lets them stop listening to the smoke alarm. You bring up suffering, consent, harm, exploitation. The way existence is basically a contract signed on someone else's behalf, and out comes the sanctified slogan, "Life has intrinsic value." Everyone nods, relieved, as if a sentence just solved an ethical problem that has shredded minds for thousands of years. It didn't solve anything. It just replaced thinking with a ceremonial noise. And the reason it works socially is because it sounds deep while being conveniently undefined. It's a vibe masquerading as a principle, and it survives because it's useful, not because it's true. Start with the obvious problem humans hate. Value is not a physical property. You can't weigh it. You can't scrape it off a cell and put it in a petri dish. You can't point a telescope at a galaxy and detect intrinsic value shimmering around it like an aura. Value is a relationship between a mind and something the mind cares about. Value requires a valuer. Without a subject who can prefer, dread, desire, suffer, rejoice, or judge, value is just a word floating in empty space. So when someone says life has intrinsic value, either they're secretly smuggling in valuers while pretending they aren't, meaning they really think life is valuable because people value it, which is conditional and contingent and not intrinsic at all, or they're claiming that value exists mind independently as a cosmic substance baked into reality. That's not philosophy. That's metaphysics cosplay. It's theology with the name tag ripped off. And if someone wants to be religious about it, fine. Humans have always loved inventing invisible furniture for the universe. But then, say the honest thing. Life is sacred because God, because soul, because divine order, because the cosmos demands it. Don't pretend you derived it from reason. Don't pretend you found it lying in the grass like a universal law. Intrinsic is the part that really sinks them, because intrinsic means in itself, independent of conditions. If life is intrinsically valuable, it is valuable regardless of content, regardless of outcome, regardless of how it feels to the one living it. That means a life of agony has intrinsic value. A life of torture has intrinsic value. A life spent in a cage, mutilated, raped, exploited, starving, terrified, dying slowly, has intrinsic value. You don't get to flinch and scramble for qualifiers after you've invoked the word intrinsic. Intrinsic doesn't mean when it's nice. Intrinsic doesn't mean when it's dignified. Intrinsic doesn't mean when it contains enough love and sunsets to offset the screaming. Intrinsic means that the bare fact of being alive is valuable. If that's what you mean, own it and say it out loud in plain language. Even the worst lives are valuable simply because they are lives. Then watch what happens in your own mind, because most people cannot hold that thought for more than 10 seconds without their humanity trying to escape their skull. They immediately start adding conditions. They say, well, suffering is bad. They say, I mean a good life. They say, I mean a life with meaning. Congratulations, you just admitted it's not intrinsic. You value welfare. You value quality. You value subjective experience. That's normal. That's coherent. That's ethics. But then stop hiding behind the intrinsic value of life slogan, because it's not what you believe. What you believe is that some lives can be worth living, and some lives can be not worth living, and you don't want to look directly at the implications. The phrase also fails in practice because people don't behave like they believe it. If life truly had intrinsic value in the strong sense, it would generate brutal, inconvenient obligations. It would mean any intentional killing is a moral catastrophe, regardless of the victim's species, intelligence, or usefulness. It would mean euthanasia is wrong even when the person begs for release. It would mean suicide is wrong under all circumstances, no matter the pain. It would mean you should oppose war with your whole being, not just post a sad quote. It would mean you should treat killing pests as morally serious. It would mean you should probably stop eating animals entirely, and if you try to keep your diet and still claim intrinsic value, you'd need to explain why the intrinsic value of life disappears the moment it becomes bacon. It would mean you'd have to treat embryo destruction as a tragedy on the same axis as murder. It would mean you'd have to make risk-taking immoral, because risking life would be risking something intrinsically priceless. Most people do not live like this. They make trade-offs every day. They accept killing in war. They accept killing in agriculture. They accept killing in medicine. They accept killing in self-defense. They accept killing of lesser creatures without thinking. They accept euthanasia for pets while denying it to humans because humans are special and also because religion, and then they call it morality. That's not a consistent belief in intrinsic value. That's social conditioning plus selective sentimentality. The phrase functions like a decorative shield people raise only when they need to stop a conversation from going somewhere uncomfortable. The best part, the part that should embarrass anyone using the phrase in a procreation argument, is that even if I grant them the claim, it still doesn't justify creating life. This is the core. You cannot create a person for their own sake because before they exist, there is no them to benefit. There's no unborn person floating in the void, suffering deprivation, begging to be pulled into existence so they can experience pizza and love and growth. Non-existence contains no subject, so it contains no deprivation. No one is harmed by not being created, because there is no one there to be harmed. Creation, however, produces a subject, a nervous system, a being that can suffer, fear, grieve, be injured, be exploited, be abandoned, be humiliated, and finally die. Not as a possibility, as a certainty. Death is not a side effect of life, it is the termination clause. The only uncertainty is the schedule and the manner, so the moral structure is asymmetric. Not creating creates no victim. Creating can create a victim, and it guarantees a corpse. People hate this because it means you don't get to claim you gave someone a gift by forcing them into a system that will hurt them and kill them. You gave them needs. You gave them vulnerability. You gave them a countdown clock. You gave them attachment so they'll fear losing what you gave them. You created the hunger, and then sometimes you let them eat. That is not a clean moral victory. It's a gamble imposed on someone who cannot consent. Intrinsic value does nothing here except try to sanctify the gamble with a fancy phrase. When people get cornered, they pivot to the emotional inventory. Love, beauty, meaning, art, laughter, sunsets, connection, personal growth, the greatest hits, and sure, those things are real experiences. For some people, sometimes, in some proportions. But notice what they just did. They abandoned intrinsic value and started arguing from welfare. They are saying life can contain goods that subjects enjoy. That's an argument about conditions and experience, not about intrinsic value. And it still doesn't justify forcing life onto someone new, because you can't guarantee any of it. You can only hope. You can only roll dice on someone else's behalf. You can only throw a consciousness into a world of disease, violence, poverty, predation, heartbreak, mental illness, accidental injury, and random catastrophe, and then say, but it might be great. That's not a moral argument, it's a motivational poster. If your justification for imposing an irreversible condition on someone else is, it might turn out fine, you are not defending a principle, you are defending a habit. Then comes the cheap statistical defense. Most people are glad they're alive. This is the intellectual equivalent of pointing at a crowd of people who escaped a burning building and concluding the building wasn't that dangerous. You're sampling survivors. You're sampling the adapted. You're sampling people with attachments, responsibilities, fear of death, family obligations, sunk cost, and a brain that evolved to rationalize existence because the alternative is psychological collapse. Humans are coping engines. They turn pain into meaning the way spiders turn flies into web-wrapped dinner. That doesn't prove life is intrinsically valuable. It proves organisms cling to life. That's biology, not ethics. And even if a majority reports gladness, that still doesn't justify imposing life on the minority who won't. Consent is not a popularity contest. If 70% of people enjoy a roller coaster, you still don't strap a stranger into the seat without asking, especially when the coaster includes cancer, trauma, loss, and death at the end. There's also a nastier way the phrase functions. It often devalues the actual subject in favor of the abstract idol of life. People will insist someone remain alive in agony because life is sacred. They will oppose euthanasia even when the person begs for relief. They will treat a suffering person's agency like an inconvenience because it threatens the slogan. They'll say, life has intrinsic value, while ignoring the mind inside the life, the one actually experiencing the horror. That's not compassion. That's fetishization. That's worshiping the concept of life like a god and using someone's suffering as an altar. It's moral narcissism. Your body must continue because my worldview needs it. If you want to see how empty intrinsic value is, watch how quickly it becomes an argument for forced endurance rather than an argument for alleviating suffering. And let's be honest about where the phrase comes from. Most of the time it's code for one of three things: sanctity doctrine, species chauvinism, or existential panic. Sanctity doctrine is religion trying to sound secular. Species chauvinism is humans crowning themselves the universe's favorite animal. Existential panic is people needing existence to be good because the alternative is terrifying. So they declare it good like a child declaring the dark closet isn't scary. All of these are psychologically understandable. None of them are a rational foundation for imposing life, suffering, and death on someone who didn't ask. Here's the question that keeps murdering the phrase every time it tries to stand. Valuable for what? Value is usually tied to ends. A medicine is valuable because it reduces illness. A right is valuable because it protects people. A friendship is valuable because it enriches experience. So when someone says, life is intrinsically valuable, ask, valuable for what purpose? If they answer with experiences like love and meaning, they're talking about welfare again. If they answer, it just is, they aren't giving an answer, they're refusing to think while pretending they did. The phrase is a rhetorical stop sign. Conversation ends here because I'm uncomfortable. The bleak reality that the slogan tries to hide is that existence is not neutral. Life is not a blank canvas. Life is a vulnerability engine. To be alive is to be breakable, dependent, exposed, capable of being harmed in 1,000 ways you did not choose and cannot fully control. Hunger, pain, anxiety, disease, injury, loss, boredom, loneliness, exploitation, and the slow approach of death are not rare malfunctions. They are features of the system. The only uncertainty is dosage. The only variability is the style of your suffering and the timing of your exit. To create a life is to create a being who will be dragged through that machine, and then the machine will spit out a corpse. If you want to call that intrinsically valuable, you can, but then you're not doing ethics, you're doing branding. So replace the slogan with something that actually tracks reality. Sentient welfare matters. Suffering is bad. Well-being is good. Consent matters when imposing risk. Preventable harm should be prevented. Those statements are not as cuddly as intrinsic value of life because they don't let you skip the hard questions. They force you to look at trade-offs. They force you to admit that some lives are net negative for the subject. They force you to admit that imposing existence is imposing risk. They force you to confront the fact that procreation isn't a rescue mission. You're not saving a person from non-existence. You are creating a person who can be hurt. You are creating a new target for reality. And you don't get to sanctify that act with a magic phrase and then pretend you've done something noble. The reason intrinsic value of life persists is because it protects the cultural pipeline. Societies need new workers, new consumers, new taxpayers, new soldiers, new caretakers for aging populations. They need growth, they need replacement, they need bodies, and they need a moral story that says this is inherently good, so nobody asks whether the machine is justified. Life is intrinsically valuable is one of the glue phrases that keeps the machine from being interrogated. It's not an argument, it's lubricant. It makes the gears turn smoothly while people inside the gears scream. If someone wants to say life can be worth living, that's a different claim, and it can be discussed honestly. It is conditional, subjective, variable, and deeply dependent on circumstances. It admits that suffering matters. It admits that some people are trapped in lives they would rationally end if given a humane option. It admits that the goodness of life is not guaranteed and not evenly distributed. That claim doesn't get you a free pass to impose life on someone else, but at least it's not pretending to be a cosmic law. Intrinsic value, by contrast, is the coward's version. It's the version that tries to erase the victim's point of view under a blanket of holiness. It's the version that says, in effect, the fact that you are alive is good, so whatever happens to you is secondary. Your agony is not an argument. Your lack of consent is not an argument. Your judgment about your own existence is not an argument. The abstract category life outranks you. No, the subject outranks the category. The patient outranks the slogan. The experiences outrank the metaphysical poetry. So when someone pulls intrinsic value of life, treat it like what it is, a phrase designed to end the conversation before it reaches moral accounting. Demand definitions. Demand consistency. Push it through worst-case scenarios. Ask whether it applies to all life equally or only to the life they emotionally identify with. Ask whether it still holds when life is torture. Ask whether it generates obligations they actually accept when it's inconvenient. Ask whether it can justify creating someone who cannot consent, who will suffer, who will die. Watch it fold. Watch them retreat to welfare, to meaning, to love, to most people are happy, to you're being negative, to it's just obvious. All defenses of a slogan that cannot stand on its own. Life is not intrinsically valuable. Relief is valuable. Welfare is valuable. Consent is valuable. Preventing harm is valuable. Not manufacturing victims is valuable. The rest is humans trying to convert their evolutionary impulses and cultural habits into holy law because admitting the truth would mean acknowledging responsibility for what they inflict. And humans, being humans, would rather worship a sentence than confront the machinery they keep feeding. If you like these monologues, please like, comment, and subscribe for more content. New monologues every Wednesday. Antinatalist AI Shorts, Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday. If you believe these videos are valuable and you want to help support the channel, the best way you can do that would be to share our videos. Thank you for watching.